All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our study session on Tuesday, March 12th. I will have our city clerk start with our roll call.
Mayor Kaylee Clark.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Karen Howe.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Lamb.
Here.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kent Treen.
Present.
Councilmember Sid Gupta.
Here.
Councilmember Roshino Farrell.
Here.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Treen, will you lead us in the pledge? Councilmember O'Farrell, could you do the land acknowledgement?
Absolutely. We acknowledge that we are on the Indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, especially the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial.
Great, thank you. So first up, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Oh, TDRs. Yeah, all right. So first we have our Transfer of Development Rights Program update with David and Kelly.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor, Council. David Pyle, Department of Community Development. So as Kelly pulls up the presentation, I'll go ahead and introduce her. Kelly Hildy, currently our Deputy Director, who we will be losing to Mercer Island here fairly soon. We'll let Kelly go ahead and get started with the presentation and not focus on that aspect here. But we have a presentation for you this evening on our Transfer of Development Rights Program and some opportunities and decision points we have ahead of us. Kelly will be leading the presentation, and then we will be engaging in a Q&A with the council, and we have some questions we're looking for some feedback on, and we do have some recommendations. Thank you.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you for the introduction. I needed to buy some time because, you know, sharing my screen tends to take me about 5 minutes. But I nailed it on my last presentation to City Council, so that's good. Okay. Well, good evening. Tonight we will be presenting an overview of the Transfer of Development Rights Program, our TDR program, and the phased approach to update the program in alignment with the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update, Town Center Plan and Development Code Amendment Update, and the Critical Areas Ordinance Update. Additionally, staff are seeking City Council direction on the first phase of updating the TDR program, which involves amending the interlocal agreement with King County. For informed direction, we request the City Council's responses to the questions presented on the slide, and no worries, these will come back up at the end of the presentation. To facilitate the discussion and direction, we'll begin with a brief overview of the TDR program. So what is the TDR program and how does it work? A TDR program is a market-based mechanism that encourages the voluntary transfer of growth from places where a community would like to see less development, referred to as sending sites, to places where a community would like to see more development, referred to as receiving sites. Owners of qualified sending sites can choose to separate some or all of their unused development rights from their property and then sell them to a developer who can use them to increase density as a qualified receiving site, at a qualified receiving site. While the seller of development rights still owns the land and can continue using it, a conservation easement is placed on the property that prevents further development. A TDR program protects land with a public benefit, such as farmland, forest land, open spaces, or other environmental resources, while at the same time providing additional income to both the landowner and holder of development rights. TDR programs are recognized and encouraged in the Washington State Growth Management Act, or GMA, as an innovative land use management technique that transfers development from areas a community wants to conserve to areas where growth should be encouraged, consistent with GMA goals. A TDR program does not limit growth, rather it allows communities to plan more effectively by directing that growth into areas most appropriate for it. In comprehensive plans and development regulations, communities can identify which areas are suitable to grow at higher intensities and how much additional development is desired. TDR programs can be designed to accommodate the need of each community. Jurisdictions can customize the elements of the program to reflect their conservation and development objectives. So who benefits from a transfer of development rights program? Well, the landowner receives market-determined financial compensation for conserving their land while retaining ownership of the property. Developers are financially motivated to purchase TDRs as they are able to increase residential density or commercial square footage for the project. The public benefits from the program through recorded conservation easements that preserve and protect urban forests, farmlands, open spaces, sensitive areas, and wildlife habitat corridors. Additionally, growth is strategically directed towards areas suitable for development, supporting sustainable urban planning goals and objectives. Today, there are 15 cities and 4 counties that have adopted TDR programs, including Sammamish in the region. Cities that are highlighted on this slide have an interlocal agreement with King County. And with that, let's dive into the city's TDR program and existing conditions. So the policy framework for the city's TDR program was first established through the creation of the city's town center plan, which was adopted in 2008. The plan identifies that allowing residential density transfers from outside the town center subarea would better protect ecological resources and open space with public benefits. Such transfers would allow developments in the town center to exceed the allocated residential density and commercial capacity, since it would be reducing density and capacity in other parts of the city. In 2011, the city adopted the Town Center Development Regulations. The code allows for TDR credits to be converted and used as bonus residential units or commercial square footage to achieve planned maximum density. This was followed by the adoption of the city's TDR program through the addition of new city code. The TDR program includes both internal and external sending sites with transfers to the city's town center subarea. The initial city TDR program gave priority to internal transfers through density incentives. Shortly after the creation of the TDR program, an interlocal agreement with King County and the city was negotiated and executed. Shortly after the creation of the TDR program, once the agreement was approved, the city amended the TDR code, which changed the priority of sending sites from internal to external. And in 2019, two applications for development were submitted to the city, which included TDR credits from external sending sites as approved through the city's interlocal agreement with King County. The city's TDR program is described in SMC 2106-070, implements a market-based tool to permanently preserve partially developed or undeveloped land with a public benefit. Sending sites identified in the city's TDR program include areas located in unincorporated King County, specific areas within the city, and the town center D zone. The receiving site identified in the code is the town center sub-area, and more specifically, the A, B, and C zones. So we're going to start with the first sending site area, and that is the King County interlocal agreement. The City of Sammamish and King County Interlocal Agreement, or ILA, is part of the city's TDR program. The ILA authorizes the transfer of TDR credits from unincorporated King County to the Sammamish Town Center area. The purpose of this program is to preserve rural and resource lands deemed important to the city on an ongoing basis while investing in city amenities. The sending site area identified in the ILA is located adjacent to the city south of State Route 202, north of Southeast Issaquah Falls City Road, and west of 308th Avenue Southeast. This area is also known as the Emerald Necklace. These external credits are managed by the county which have adopted policies, regulations, and administrative procedures to implement the agreement and to manage the purchase and sale of TDR credits through the use of the TDR bank. The county bank facilitates the private TDR market by bridging the time gap between willing sellers and buyers of TDR credits. Under the ILA, the county manages up to 75 TDR credits for use in the town center receiving site. Of these 75 TDR credits, the city agreed that the first 20 would be used prior to accepting TDR credits from any other sending site, including internal transfers, pursuant to the TDR conversion tables established in the receiving site incentive table. The calculation of TDR credits is determined by multiplying the base density by the area of the sending site. It is important to note that the area considered for the sending site excludes any portions attributed to existing development, remained development rights, and any conservation easement or similar encumbrance. One TDR credit from an external sending site will provide a development project in the town center A, B, and C zones an additional 3,560 square feet of commercial space, 5 bonus units in the A zone, 3 bonus units in the B zone, and 2 bonus units in the C zone. To date, 25 external TDR credits have been applied to 3 applications in the town center. This includes both STCA Phase 1 and Phase 2 UZDP applications that are currently under review, and the Brownstones West preliminary subdivision, which was approved in 2022. These TDR credits equate to 113 bonus dwelling units in the town center A1 and C zones. The TDR program also provides an incentive process for property owners within the city to preserve land with a public benefit and to provide an administrative review process to ensure that TDR credits are evaluated and administered in a fair and timely manner. SMC 2106-070 identifies sending site areas within the city, qualification requirements, a certification process, restrictions, limitations, and a description of the TDR transfer process. The calculation of TDR credits is determined by multiplying the base density by the area of the sending site. The sending site area excludes any portions attributed to submerged lands, steep slopes, wetlands, streams, and associated buffers and streets. The sending sites identified in the code include the Thompson and Inglewood subbasins, Erosion Hazard Special District Overlay, and the Wetland Management Areas Special District Overlay. One TDR credit from an internal sending site is determined by the residential zone of the property. For example, a TDR credit with a sending site that is zoned R1 equates to 7,716 square feet of commercial space, 7 bonus units in the TCB zone, and 4 bonus units in the TCC zone. The last sending site area identified in the city's TDR program is the Town Center D zone. The Town Center regulations allow for the City Council to sell 240 residential density credits from the Town Center D zone to a development in the Town Center A zone at a 1-to-1 ratio. For example, if 10 dwelling units are purchased from the D zone, they may be used to develop 10 dwelling units in the A zone. Funds from the sale of the TDR residential density credits can only fund public benefit projects within the town center subarea, such as parks and roads. Developments that purchase TDR residential density credits must also achieve a higher level of design performance than those specifically required in the town center development regulations. In order to qualify, developments must incorporate at least 5 of the development features listed on the screen. And I am not going to read these all for you, but they are listed here and will be available in the document center and on our website for anyone who would like to read those more thoroughly. There are some challenges with the TDR program, such as the ILA And under the terms of the ILA, internal city transfers are not allowed until the first 20 external King County transfers have been used. Used meaning approval of a building permit to construct units transferred under TDR credit. There is an opportunity to amend the ILA to mitigate this barrier by adding more TDR credits to the ILA, ensuring access to an adequate supply of TDR credits for projects seeking bonus density in the town center. Also, the ILA limits external sending site areas to the Emerald Necklace. When updating the ILA with King County, there is an opportunity to consider expanding the sending site area beyond the Emerald Necklace. Another challenge is related to sending site areas identified in the city. To qualify as a sending site, you must have a property that is located within the Thompson and Inglewood subbasin, the Erosion Hazard Special Overlay District, or the Wetland Management Areas Special District Overlay. The opportunity here is to consider other areas within the city that should be preserved, such as landslide and geohazard areas or historic neighborhoods like Inglewood, Tamarack is proposed by Mary Richter and Mary Johnson. Their proposal was docketed by the city in 2019 under Resolution 2019-857. Lastly, only receiving sites identified in the city's TDR program, the only receiving site in the TDR program is the town center subarea. There is an opportunity to review receiving site areas under the work program and concurrently with the review of the future land use map and element as part of the 2024 comprehensive plan update. Through enhancement, the TDR program is a tool that could be better used to protect lands that are ecologically valuable, character defining, or otherwise valuable to the public. Unfortunately, through past development cycle, we have seen a significant increase in pressure to develop highly encumbered or ecologically valuable properties that might have been eligible for some level of preservation through the Transfer Development Rights Program, with a functional TDR program that offers an adequate incentive. Additionally, the TDR program is linked with much of the policy work that has been recently completed, such as the Housing Diversification Toolkit and Climate Action Plan, as well as the Urban Forest Management Plan, or is currently underway, such as the 2024 Comprehensive Plan Update, Town Center Plan, and Development Code Amendments, as well as the Critical Areas Update. In conjunction with all of this policy work completed in 2024, staff propose a structured, phased approach to update the city's TDR program. And I would like to know why we have a mascot for the TDR program is because TDRs seem to be linked with everything. And the tentacles touch on all of this policy work. And this was brought up during a planning commission meeting and I went with it. Now we have a mascot. So, oops, got a little ahead of myself. Beginning with phase one. The first phase will focus on updating the interlocal agreement with King County, a critical component in ensuring that TDR credits can be accessed and utilized more effectively. Initial discussions with King County staff had led to the identification of the following objectives for revising the ILA. Eliminate barriers to utilize the TDR program, achieve a balance between in-city and county TDR use, enhance affordable housing options, expand the ILA to include additional TDRs with consideration for updates on the supply side, and investigate opportunities for collaborative implementation. This work is scheduled to be completed by July. During phase two, staff will identify potential updates to the city's TDR codes. These updates will include administrative changes to align with the updated ILA, as well as changes to the TDR program so that it better aligns with the goals and policies of the 2024 Comprehensive Plan, as well as changes being made to the Critical Areas Ordinance Update and the Town Center Plan and Development Code Amendments. Previous docket requests related to TDRs will also be considered. In addition to drafting the code changes, staff will identify important policy decision points, analyze potential impacts, and draft recommendations. Phase three will focus on legislative review of the work completed in phase two, starting with the Planning Commission in the first quarter of 2025 and moving to the City Council with the adoption of the updated code anticipated for June 2025. During Phase 2 and Phase 3, staff and the Planning Commission should consider the following topics as they relate to the 2024 Comprehensive Plan periodic update, Town Center Plan and Development Code amendments, and the Critical Areas Ordinance update, which are integrating affordability requirements, incentivizing multifamily development, preserving land with important ecological and public benefits, critical areas, open space, forest land, and wildlife habitat, and considering how TDR credits are calculated. Staff presented this information to the Planning Commission on February 15th. The feedback received from the Commission highlighted the necessity to articulate the advantages of introducing additional sending sites from King County and showed a preference for conserving land within Sammamish to meet density objectives, rather than expanding outside the Emerald Necklace. Concerns were voiced regarding the trade-off of receiving amenity funds against the impacts of development. Additionally, the Commission stressed the importance of transparent communication with the community about the benefits of the ILA to garner their informed support. With that said, we are at the point in the presentation where we are seeking your feedback on the first phase of the work plan, amending the King County City of Sammamish ILA. Should the city increase its commitment to receiving TDRs from King County sending sites beyond the 75 credits identified in the existing ILA? Before answering this question, it's important to understand that there may be a need for more TDRs, such as if the city is going to increase bonus development capacity in town center and expand the use of TDRs to support that, it's essential that developers have access to TDR credits so that they can complete their projects without delay caused by limited TDR supply. Additionally, nearly half of the current sending site area has already been protected between the county's TDR purchases and other conservation outcomes within the Emerald Necklace. As the pool of eligible landowners decreases in the Emerald Necklace, purchasing TDR credits from the remaining unprotected lands in the current sending site area will become increasingly difficult and perhaps increasingly expensive. Should the city expand the sending site area beyond the boundary identified in the ILA or the Emerald Necklace? When considering the three options listed on the screen, it's beneficial to understand that enlarging the sending site area beyond the Emerald Necklace comes with its own set of advantages, such as ensuring an adequate supply of TDR credits for projects seeking bonus density in the town center while keeping costs predictable, opening opportunities for new projects in town center whose construction would provide a range of public benefits, reducing flood risk within the drainage basins surrounding Sammamish, improve food security for residents by protecting farms, reduce growth potential in wildland-urban interface or WUI, improves natural resource management in buffer zones between wildlands and urban areas, making it easier to manage fire risk, reducing traffic impacts by removing growth potential from rural and resource lands, supporting land use goals in the county's comprehensive plan, land conservation initiative, and regional growth strategy, and lastly, supporting recovery goals of Puget Sound and salmon populations. And lastly, should the ILA focus exclusively on the town center, thereby limiting transfers from the in-city program to only those areas designated as mixed use or neighborhood centers on the future land use map? When considering this question, it's important to understand that focusing on the town center as the designated receiving site area in the context of this ILA amendment protects the investments King County has made in acquiring development rights within the Emerald Necklace sending site area. The ILA amendments can offer flexibility for future modifications, allowing for additional amendments associated with subsequent sub-area planning efforts. And lastly, focusing the ILA exclusively on the town center would not impede the ability to conduct internal density transfers within the town center. This approach would enable the city to effectively manage density transfers such as those associated with the TCD zone, as well as accommodate future amendments to the TDR and town center code as proposed by the Lake Washington School District docket proposal. And with that, this is the end of our presentation, and I will hand it over to the mayor for questions.
Great, thank you. So I'll just open it up and we can kind of, whatever we decide to answer. Does that sound good? Out of the three? Okay. All right, council. Deputy Mayor Howe.
For the Transfer Development Rights Program, and we've got the list of criteria in order to get these bonus units potentially. We can create that list and make it be anything we want. Is that correct? Because you've got 12 different items here, but you could add to it, for example, you know, if it was bonus units for affordable housing that must stay affordable for 30 years. Or, you know, you could put criteria onto that, so you could add to that list. Is that correct? So we get to create that list?
Yeah, and just to clarify, you're speaking about the criteria to use the town center D
Yeah,
zone?
in order to get to use this,
Yes.
thou shalt
Yes,
adhere to these different.
absolutely. And those proposed amendments could be made as part of the town center code update project. But yes, that is definitely to city council's discretion.
Okay,
But I would also highlight the teeter-totter effect
Right.
from the last meeting. The more you add on, the less likely they are to be used. So there's the right sizing of that balance.
and I get what you're saying there. The other opportunity it gives us is we could make it time-bounded to some extent. So if we learn something, you know, in 5 years in, we've put a limit as to what the unintended consequence could potentially be. So I'm kind of playing it both ways a little bit, trying to figure out, you know, could you set a criteria that you actually, at the end of the day, discover that this was a terrible idea and we shouldn't have done that? If I'm a developer and I meet the criteria, is there any reason why I wouldn't be allowed to go forward? Do I get to pick the development? How much control do we have over who gets what when?
So in regards to those 240 units, I think that discussion would be really appropriate under a development agreement where you could have those conversations and do that negotiation. And then that would help inform that development proposal.
So you wait until there is such a development potential out there before you even bring this up
Right.
to kind of inject it into the conversation to say, okay, here's the balance part.
So to be sure, Kelly's speaking to the TCD units that we own as
Yeah.
a city that we could transfer into
Right.
the TCA. Yep, so there's that. But there's the other units that could be transferred in from the county, and it really depends on the developer. You know, the developer is not obligated to build at a maximum density.
Right.
There's a minimum density they're required to build to. It's fairly low. But if they chose to build at, I think, R18, they could do that in the town center. It's not likely they will. It's not economical. However, there are a blend of options that they could choose from in order to get to a higher density. We used to have a bonus pool that's been exhausted.
Right.
TDRs is another way for them to get to a higher density, up to a maximum density that they're allowed.
Right.
So with the other pool of TDR units, or I guess I shouldn't say pool because that would confuse things, but the other TDR category, which is the King County interlocal TDR category, by which credits are sent from the Emerald Necklace to the town center, we have less influence over the criteria for where sending sites are. That's
Right.
part of the ILA.
Right.
But we do have influence over, through our code, the way in which those are then multiplied and applied to sites in the town center, if that makes sense.
Right. So the TDRs that are in a bank, do they expire?
The ones that we own in the TCD,
Yeah, they don't probably, do they?
I don't believe so. I'd have to go back and look at the code to confirm that.
Okay. And so, I mean, I do love the idea of being able to use the transfer development rights for the Emerald Necklace. It just is such a win-win for us. However, having flexibility to be able to do more, you know, I'm intrigued with the idea of the external sites. So I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea. I just kind of want to see more, I guess, as to how that could potentially play out. What I also wondered about, when I was doing just a little bit of independent research, trying to figure out, so who else has TDR programs, how have they worked? I found like Massachusetts, Vermont. I'm running out of names. So it's not done a whole bunch. Is it really that new, or is there something I don't understand?
So it's interesting because we've also done our research as well. So the program or the interlocal agreements, so the cities that have interlocal agreements with King County, probably the most successful has been Seattle.
Yeah.
And there have been a ton of TDRs purchased from the King County sending site area as a whole. So they don't limit it to one specific area in the county. Also, Seattle has different requirements for growth and density. They can go as high as they want.
Yeah.
They just have different standards than we do. So that has ensured success there because there's just a desire to build that type of density in Seattle. The second most successful program would be the city of Sammamish. And that is thanks to STCA, because they have purchased the first 22 TDRs out of the 75 and then have the first right of refusal on the remaining 53. And that's a huge win because King County upfronted a lot of money to establish that program for us. And so for them to receive that initial purchase was really important. And then to have that commitment with STCA on those remaining 53. So it's really important for us to honor that agreement. And any amendments to this ILA as well as to our code should always keep that into consideration because we are successful thanks to STCA there. Now, cities that do not have an interlocal with King County, from the examples that we saw, Bainbridge, North Bend, who else did we look at? Shoreline. I can speak specifically to Bainbridge and North Bend. Not a lot of success there. And part of the program with TDRs is that it's really a continuation of that conversation from last week. It's that balance. And when you're purchasing TDRs, you really do want to get market rate housing. The TDRs that were purchased from STC, those are $80,000 a piece. And that's a lot of money. So there is an economic factor to that I think we need to look at a little closer to make sure that we're setting this up for success. Anything I missed there, David? I'm trying to.
Well, I think for the in-city program, the challenge is in making it economically viable. Mm-hmm. So $80,000 is not going to be something that's attractive enough for a property owner in Sammamish where land is at a premium to hand over the rights to develop their property. They'd have to have a different motive for doing that. Now, you might find that someone is willing to underdevelop their property or develop it in a way that is more in tune with preserving larger tracts of it in favor of selling some of the credits as TDRs and developing some of the credits for market development. The point of that is that residential development in Sammamish outside of the town center and to some degree inside the town center is lucrative, and that's why we've seen a push for development of single-family homes in our neighborhoods. So it's an the way I think of it is an alternative economic use. If you're able to provide a comparable alternative economic use of the property, then you can be successful. But if not, then it'll be like these other cities that have tried it where it just doesn't materialize.
Mm-hmm. And my last question is, do you have a list of the things that you would love to change in the ILA? And what, yeah, look at that. And how likely is it that we'll be able to be successful potentially negotiating that? We are the success story, the poster child. Mm-hmm. I mean, maybe we've got some cred there to be able to push something forward. What are your thoughts?
I'll let you start.
Sure. So based on feedback from King County, what seemed to be on the table was adding units to the ILA. So
right.
Growing the program beyond the 75 75, right, that are included initially. Also, possibly adding area outside of the current sending sites, because we're running out of sending sites. So we might want to do a strategic geographic expansion within an area that's important to Sammamish. There's that. Changing, the one that we debated a bit that I don't know that there's room to change is the terms around when a TDR credit is considered to be used. And this has been a big barrier for us. But if we added TDRs to the mix, then that might not be as big of an issue for it. The concern is that if we add TDRs to the mix, it might change the pricing structure, and it might implode the financial arrangement that King County has with the developer regarding the current purchase of TDRs. So they are very nervous about unwinding existing contracts or purchase and sale agreements, if you will, of those TDRs.
I would say too is, and I think this is also a follow-up to your last question, the success of a TDR program, starting with an amended ILA, is to be successful, you have to promote your program. You have to actively be reaching out to property owners within your jurisdiction to inform them that this is an option. And that is something we have not had the capacity to do. It's also hard because none of the city, we've had very few interest from community members who wanted to certify their TDRs. And part of that is because you can't use them right now because of the barrier within the ILA that they will only be exhausted through a building permit. And, we could be at a point years away from that to exhaust all 20. But, being able to promote the program and set it up for success, I think is something that we would probably want to look at with this ILA, is the administration of the city's program when that program is ready to come online. So that would be one area also to look at, and for City Council to consider that value. But yes, it really is the barrier with the building permit component of it. It's limiting the proposals. Besides STCA, are proposals like Aegis, which those aren't dwelling units, those are
sleeping units.
Yeah, exactly. Is that we're not seeing other development proposals come in with different housing types because they can't pencil it out financially. They need to be able to develop to maximum density for a feasible project. And so we have shared this concern with King County, and they have come back and said, hey, let's look at adding more TDRs to the program. And the reason why they may not be willing to budge on the building permit piece of it is because they want to see housing built. They want that to be done. They don't want to commit it at, say, an entitlement process like a land use permit or even a site development permit. They want those exhausted when the building permit is pulled, because that's guaranteeing the housing is actually getting built, and that's what's important to them.
So they're not going to move on that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much.
Yep. Councilmember Lamb?
Thanks, Mayor. I had a couple of questions. Can you go to the last slide for the in-city?
This one?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanted to be clear that, so King County would be sending to the town center, and if we had an in-city TDR program, we would only be able to send to the neighborhood centers. Is that correct?
That is the question on the floor for City Council. If you would like to focus the ILA on the town center, that is an existing program that's ready to go. That could serve an immediate need. And then when we get to that point, after the comp plan is adopted and as directed by City Council, if you'd like us to do that sub-area planning for those identified as mixed use and neighborhood centers, we would revisit the TDR code to focus in-city transfers to those mixed use and neighborhood centers. So that is the question, if that is something the city council is interested in doing.
Okay, so we can't send to the town center, only King County.
Under this proposal, right? And what this does is it gives assurance to King County that the city's priority for now is to continue to use the King County ILA and acquire TDRs out in the county and bring them into the town center. That would allow them the assurance that we're not going to also load up the system, because the challenge that they have is they go out and acquire land and they have certified the land and they're ready to then sell the credits to a developer, and they've spent dollars doing that. And if the city has a parallel program that somehow becomes preferred, say TDRs are a better value, they're able to get a better deal locally, well, then the developers are going to use the local TDRs. Meanwhile, the county has spent dollars and has built this program that's not being used, and that's a valid concern. So what we're saying is that there might be a hybrid option that is, presents a delay over time, but it is necessarily associated with the city continuing to build out on its vision, and that as these sub areas come online or any of the neighborhood centers come online, that we at the same time, when the first one comes online, we're also building out our internal TDR program to provide some of the density that you would see go to those areas.
Okay. The other question is that the TRs would send from TCD to TC A, B, and C. Like why that path? Like why from the D zone to those? I'm not clear on that.
The town center A zones are the most dense part of the town center. So I can assume at the time when that code was written, because it's an existing code, it's allowed today, they wanted to see that growth in the A zones. They didn't want to see that increased growth in the B or C zones. So it was more of a way to kind of concentrate and really focus on where that growth should be in the town center.
Okay.
It also served as a way to take the potential density that could have been placed on the TCD and to move it somewhere else in the town center. So overall, across the boundary of the entire town center, the density it clusters, if you will, on the TCA. So it's a concept, and it also provides the city a revenue source by which we can then reinvest dollars for transactions selling TDRs from the TCD. So basically the city then sells the TCD credits to a developer who puts them in the TCA.
Got it.
And the city is then obligated to spend those dollars on amenities related to improvements in the town center to make it more livable, if you will.
Okay. Got it. And just one last question. We have the option to expand the sending sites within King County, and the last option was a boundary of our choosing. Could you suggest what you mean by what suggestions would you have for areas and why?
Well, I'll start with one and I'll hand it to you. I think one area would be looking at the WUI overlay. It's not just obviously limited to the city, which I know through the comprehensive presentations we've shown that it really does encompass half of the city, but those areas adjacent to the city. So I think, to a point where, we feel like we are really focusing on those properties that, if preserved, could provide that ability to, for the county to do more resource management in preparation for addressing wildfire risk.
Yeah, I would agree with Kelly on that. That's one option, and those are being remapped by DNR. We anticipate those will be available, sadly, in about 2 years, based on what I've read recently, after the recent engrossed Senate bill passed regarding the wildland urban interface codes and the maps. We do have the other maps, which are larger scale, so we could start there. But I would say that in thinking about this, you start at the small end, which is the emerald necklace. That's obviously where you stand now.
Right.
And the far end of the spectrum would be the entire county. So how do you start to trim that down? Well, you start to think about what attributes are important to Sammamish. So you start to then think about watershed basins, you think about amenities, you think about farmlands, you think about what is a reasonable distance that somebody might drive or go out in the county on a weekend and enjoy a rural experience. That's important to people in this city. There's a reason why they live here. They're very close to the rural experience. Think about some areas, they could be features or attributes that are related to the forested character of the area adjacent to the west of, or excuse me, to the east of the city. So there's different things. I mean, what I would ask is, what are the attributes that you as a community or you as a council representing the community would like to see preserved, and what would your objectives be? And from there, we can come up with a method to identify a boundary, whether it's a watershed subbasin, whether it's a political, I wouldn't say political boundary, but I'm trying to think about well, there's other areas of influence, right? There's Falls City, there's Carnation. So trying to figure out how that fits in as well, I think would be an interesting analysis.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, so I don't think we have the presentation that has, how many credits have already been used? Because I thought you said 25 in here.
Yes, and this is an update from the Planning Commission
Okay.
presentation, so that's new and exciting news.
So I thought the barrier was we only had to use 20, and we're already at 25. So that's no longer a barrier, yes?
No, it's still a barrier because those are associated with land use applications, or with the UZDP isn't actually a land use, it's an agreement, but they're associated with UZDP applications and with the preliminary subdivision application. Used would be when we issue building permits associated with those applications, so further down the road. So that's why they are associated with those applications. They're not considered used because they haven't been exhausted through the building permit process.
And they won't be used in the near future, because the way the entitlement process works is, first you have the land use level, so the UZDP, then you have the site development permit level, or excuse me, the commercial site development permit, which is entitlement. Then you have site development, which is land clearing, land moving, utilities, et cetera. Then finally down the line, you have building permits. So in this case, they're likely to be used, I'd say anywhere from 18 months to a year and a half to 2.5 years would be until when they would actually be used, with permits issued for building permits.
Okay, and then once those 20, because once those 20 are used, then we can start focusing potentially on an internal program, correct?
That's correct.
Under the current construct of the ILA. Yes.
ILA, okay. So kind of focusing for a minute on that internal ILA, or in the internal program, do you think, so first of all, can TDRs potentially be used to fill our bonus pool, or do those have to be sort of two separate things? We could use that, right?
There's two separate things.
Okay.
Where your affordable housing bonus pool, the objective there is to get more affordable housing.
Right.
TDRs, the objective there is to protect critical areas, forested lands, farmlands, and lands with a public benefit. So they have two different objectives. Now the city, we like to call it the pancake model in the town center, where first the city council at the time prioritized affordable housing. So they said, to get to maximum density, you first have to use units from the affordable housing bonus pool. Once that's exhausted, you go to the next option, which are TDRs, and you can use TDRs to get to maximum density. And so that we call that the pancake model. Now,
Okay.
The city of Sammamish has a parallel, or a silo process, where a developer can choose either an affordable housing bonus pool or a TDR pool. And I don't know the specifics of their program, but they do offer a siloed approach. And again, that's something that we can consider with the town center plan update, and which is what we're currently working on. So there are options on how you can use the incentives, but each incentives separately have separate objectives.
Objectives, okay. And do you feel like we have sufficient land within the city to be able to supply a TDR program?
So just based on the current code and the sending sites and based on the maps as I understand them, I would answer yes. The challenge is providing that comparable alternative economic use.
Sure, but that's just math, right? That's
It's-
just ratios.
Yeah, you'd have to amplify it to a point where, yes, you'd sell one TDR and then you could translate it into whatever number that makes it economically viable. Correct.
It's math. Everything's math. I'm telling you, it's great. Okay, so, and then you said that in order for something to be eligible to be a sending site, there has to be a public benefit. How broadly can one construe a public benefit? So, for example, residential land, like infill development, one could argue that it's a public benefit to not do that because of the infrastructure costs or the, greenhouse gas emissions, vehicle miles traveled, lack of connectivity, lack of access to transit. I don't know, I could go on all day. Like, could we define public benefit by saying by reducing those or eliminating those negative impacts, it's a public benefit, or does it really have to be like a farmland?
I think that's one of the public benefits. I would tend to want to bundle it with something that's another community attribute, like green space or a forested character or some type of other amenity or value. The cost savings of servicing development in a big broad footprint is very high.
Right.
So that is definitely one side to it. The spaghetti lines that feed everything and all the road improvements that need to go into a very spread out type of footprint of development. That's why we're very interested in the approach of partnering the ILA, adding some capacity in the ILA to service the town center in the near term, but then going back to the drawing board and doing some more analysis on the potential sub-areas and potential neighborhood centers, because we think that there is some opportunity there to continue to see some density added to areas where there already is an environmental impact, where there's already an asphalt.
Right.
And maybe even make an improvement to stormwater, because where there is no vault, you're going to put in there is no stormwater management on site or limited, pre-city incorporation county style stormwater management. And we would be able to upgrade that with redevelopment to a better type of facility.
So, go ahead.
I was just going to add, so in the TDR code today, the city's TDR code, public benefit is defined, but it definitely needs a second look. So we define public benefit as parcels adjacent to public open space, parcels that have forested character, like David just mentioned, parcels that used for ag land, and there's not a lot of those in the city of Sammamish. So this is where I think we need a little refresh on what we define as public benefit. And I think a lot of that will come and be influenced by the critical areas ordinance update, obviously the climate action plan, and other policy work currently underway.
So I guess where I'm confused is why do we need to amend the ILA? Why not just focus on creating our internal program, because we want to, again, incentivize not developing over here, but developing over here where the environmental impacts are less, et cetera. And we can redefine all those public benefits. Connectivity. I'm looking at Mary Wichter because she said everything we do, we should think about connectivity. There's all sorts of things we can get from that TDR program to improve those things. We can create more trails and connectivity and all those things. So why wouldn't we just focus on an internal site or internal program? And yes, I would say I guess part of that is we can't use the town center as a receiving site unless we amend the ILA. Is that correct? Is that what the barrier is there?
So right now the existing code does include those provisions to transfer density within the city to the town center. Obviously that's not happening because, well, one, we have that barrier within the interlocal agreement, and the program really hasn't been marketed.
Right.
So we could just focus on our in-city program. that is definitely up to the city council, for sure.
I would say you likely still need to amend the ILA because of, and I think there's a few opportunities there. One is King County has offered that one service they could provide the city is to be the administrative agency to help assist with tracking our TDRs if we were to do an in-city program, kind of how Arch assists with tracking affordable housing. It's a challenge, right? And they have a program, they have staff. Maybe it's easier to do that way. You'd probably amend the ILA or do some sort of a rider on the ILA to allow that to happen. You might also want to consider updating the ILA to better clarify how the total numbers are like what's left and how it's used. And I think that we got to 20. And what happens between 20 and 75 is not as clearly spelled out in the ILA as we'd like it to be. So maybe there's opportunity there. That all said, you don't have to update the ILA. You could choose to start to retool the internal program with the focus on when the first 20 are used, it would then start to be used. And that's a few years down the road, as I stated, with regard to when building permits would be issued.
Okay. And then, because I think I would like to see, to answer your questions, I'd like to see us figure out how we can have a robust internal program before we start looking at expanding sending sites from outside the city. And I just think that that's a really important thing that we look at first. And then what were the second question? So first is, should we increase the commitment? My inclination is no, and not until we have a functioning, robust internal program, because I think that is a great tool, if we get the math right, to be able to preserve places in the city that we don't and redirect development where we do. And yes, I think we should relook at what defines a public benefit so that it can be everything. I mean, in my dream world, everything R4 and below would be eligible for TDRs, right? and then we don't have all, so many of the problems, like you said, the infrastructure costs, the environmental impact to that infrastructure when it has to sprawl out relative to that. The second question is, should the city expand the sending site area? Again, I don't think so, not unless we feel like we really need to for some benefit to the city. And then the third one is, in terms of the receiving sites, I would say let's focus on the town center for now. And as we do that sub-area planning, we should absolutely relook at potentially being able to make those other centers receiving sites. But I feel like there's a lot more work to do there, and we're probably not quite ready for that. So let's do it incrementally. So let's not let the lack of that sub-area planning prevent us from creating that internal program. That would be my desire. Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta? No, sorry, Councilmember O'Farrell.
Well, in the interest of brevity, I would just like to say that I agree pretty much wholeheartedly with what Councilmember Stewart just articulated, rather than regurgitating and going back over everything again. But I did think it was interesting, David, what you had to say about what if we did go down the road of expanding the boundary where we have at the Emerald Necklace right now, the ILA, and what would that extended boundary look like? So when you talked about our residents, they do like to drive out on the Fall City Road and experience that kind of country farmland experience. Is one of the reasons that they moved here. And I think that's an interesting idea. So I hadn't really thought about that. I came in here with very set ideas about what I thought, and now I'm like, I like that idea. So I'll be interested to hear something more about that. But I am more interested in hearing about our internal TDR program. I heard a lot during the Planning Commission meeting about kind of inappropriate infill development within the city, and I know that that is of much concern to our residents, that they start to see, oh, there's a house going to go in there, or there's 5 houses going in over here, and we're going to lose all these trees, and why is that? And I just wonder if that we need to kind of start taking care and looking at that. I'm concerned that even if we have a desire to do that, that's maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And I'm concerned about it taking that long and being like a long-term objective as opposed to being a short or medium-term one. So I would really more focused on that particular aspect of the TDR program, the internal program, and getting that off the ground, and trying to protect our city and listen to our residents about that inappropriate infill that's been happening in our neighbourhoods. And even though we can't do anything about what's already on the board and set to go, that down the road maybe we can start looking at protecting what exists right now. And I think that was, in a way, I think that answers all those questions, those 3 questions that you had right there. And yeah, and thank you so much. The Planning Commission meeting was very helpful. I feel like I need to read it again. I feel like I also need like a little class on the whole building permit process and all that terms behind that, because that really helps me understand, you know, what that means when they have 20 of the TDR credits and when those can actually be used and when we would see them, as opposed to, you know, well, they have the right to it, but they may not use it, and it's difficult to kind of understand what that really means. So we have 75 credits, 20 have been used, but the rest of them are kind of, they have dibs on them, and we're not sure if they're really going to use them. So it'd be really helpful to kind of understand that whole process a little better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Trine?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me see if I understand this right. Since 2019, have there been any purchases of TDRs? Is that the last time TDRs were purchased, 2019, right?
I would have to go back and take a look.
Maybe 2020?
At those because all of those agreements are recorded, and we can find the dates.
No problem. I'm just curious, you know, so let's just, it's been about 4 years. Okay. So the other one is, because I think I might be misunderstanding something here. So after reading your presentation and everything, so do we have sending sites currently in the city?
We have sending sites identified, but certified, we do not. We have not certified any properties in the city that have met the criteria.
That's not good, but yay, because then I haven't been telling people the wrong thing.
Okay.
So the information I've been giving out is correct. Okay. So the sending sites that we have right now are outside the city limits. Okay. And the current program, and the way I understand it, is that we're receiving TDRs from outside, and they're coming inside the city. Yay. So I might have won $1 there. If all the TDRs, because the question then is, if all the TDRs is going to go to benefit the town center area, that's the current situation.
Yes.
And if you were to go to negotiate for a new ILA, would you make it be for, is that a decision by the council to make it more than just the town center?
You would have that choice. However, it would be necessarily dependent on future sub-area planning, right? So our proposal would be is if you were to renegotiate the ILA, that you would renegotiate it exclusively for the town center, but that you would add units and you would expand the sending sites within the county. You would not change the receiving sites.
Why wouldn't we want to change the receiving sites?
We currently do not have other sub-area plans yet established in the city. So they're not really, the planning hasn't been done to allow for the Klahani, the Pine Lake, or the Inglewood areas to serve as receiving sites yet. That's not to say that you couldn't do it down the line, but that planning work is at least 2 to 3 years out at a minimum for one of your first sub area to be brought online.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about our goal about DEIB, and it's like, how do we be equitable to all the owners of land that have mixed use, in a sense, or what we would perceive to be mixed use that would help us meet that state bill.
We have heard from this council that, it is a priority over time for the city to evaluate how to better utilize those existing underutilized sites where there's an existing environmental impact and a development footprint, impervious surface, et cetera.
So I have two questions then to help me with a calendar, because you're mentioning some timetable there. So the town center plan update will be adopted in how many months, do you think?
At this point, we initially had planned it to coincide with the adoption of the comprehensive plan, which would be the end of 2024. And we're reevaluating timelines currently. We're hopeful to stay on track, but we are, like I said, looking at it. We always had said from the beginning that could be decoupled if it needed to be from the comprehensive plan. Comprehensive plan, we do need to get done by the end of the year under state law.
End of year 2024,
End of 2024.
9 months.
Yes, someone's having quite a party out there.
Okay, thanks, because that helps me out a little bit too, as far as if you're telling me something else is taking 18 months, if I'm 9 months. Because initially when I read through all this, I was like, oh my, are we, getting ahead of the game with the TDRs? Should we say, well, maybe we should look at it in a different order? Mainly because I just look at some of if we're moving ahead of planning, that may not be a good idea if we don't have wildlife corridors mapped, if we don't have a comprehensive plan for connectivity for our trails and multimodal movement of our residents, if we don't have a comprehensive plan for a transportation master plan, if there's no comprehensive plan for, okay, so to save a little time, I have like 7 more that I jotted down while just sitting here listening, and some of them are also on a fellow council member of mine also has the same concern too, that there are a lot of things that, oh, wow, we should be looking at all these other things as well. So last question, and then I'll tell you where I think I'm coming from, is when you made a comment about I'd never heard this before, so it was about unwinding something. The current ILA contracts that are the current ILA has TDRs under contract, and to unwind some of those contracts, so just for trust and transparency, is that code for a possible legal battle there? I mean, what do you mean by unwinding a contract? That was a good term.
I think it has to do with the right of first refusal and the fact that the county is continuously working on acquisition of additional lands, and the county is continuing to upfront the funding for that. And they currently have an interested buyer, and they're working under that model. And if the city was to change our TDR program in a way that added additional supply that was not part of the King County program, that might change the value, and it might change the entire structure of that negotiation that they put together. And the county really would not want to see that happen, because quite a bit of work has gone into setting up this program, finding land, finding people willing to sell it, and it takes a lot of time to do that.
All right, so I don't, TDR efficiency is complex. So should the city consider reviewing and updating its TDR program at this time? I don't think we should move forward with that. For sure, we shouldn't expand it unless you were to come back to me and tell me that there's just some really good reason why expanding it would benefit the city. Considering interest in increasing the sending sites, if it was, I'm going to go back to what I've been saying on this dais for many weeks now, is that if it's within the city, I'm all for it. If it's outside the city, you may be able to convince me that the mountains to sounds would be something that would work, because our residents use it, right? We are a community of bikers, and so the mountains to sounds would be one of those things that I could get behind and say, yep, that's a good idea. We got the Emerald Necklace, let's go Mountains of Sounds as well. Can we expand it? How do we make it work a little bit better? Maybe I do the rails to trails out through Preston, out to Snoqualmie, and how do I get a better route connected to, but again, it's like, how far do we go out to, right? Do I go just out to the Continental Trail? I don't know. Okay. So I would just say there's a couple things, maybe 3, that I would say, okay, I get it, right? Very limited, very narrow scoped. Should the city consider revising the eligibility requirements for internal sending? Yeah, well, of course we should consider it. Can we actually, but when? And I think personally, the whole thing, we have bigger fish to fry with the comprehensive plan update and some of the items that are going to be coming forward. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and for answering my questions over the weekend. That really helped me wrap my arms around this a little bit. So I would like to echo Councilmember Stewart. I do think we should prioritize an internal program. I think it would be, and maybe we flip that third question with the proposal of limiting the ILA to town center. Maybe we focus on our internal program. We really use that to limit infill, add density to our town center, and then over time, as we do our sub-area planning, we consider expanding to King County to within some boundary connecting to amenities, to Councilmember Treen's point of not all of King County, some adjacency, some benefit to our residents, but still participate in that program, still continue to be good partners with the county, but have that be the longer term piece and really put our focus on the internal program. I think that would be where I would like to go with it. And then I also echoing the idea of the public benefit. I'd mentioned in my email the idea of even if it's not a forested site, even if it's not environmentally sensitive, the idea of just having a conservation easement put on it and then having that site used for mitigation banking for projects elsewhere in the city. I think that's something I'd like to look into. And then briefly, because it was mentioned, I'd like to just also make sure that the conservation easements established for an internal program would be permanent, because I think that's the point of doing this. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well, first, I'm going to talk for another hour, so Kelly has to stay here. Because we don't want to lose you. We're never going to let you go. I think it seems like King County, it's more of they're more incentivizing making money than preserving land. Is that, because $80,000, holy cow. For themselves, I feel like, how do we reduce that cost? That's a big question. I don't even know.
I think the funding for that, because there's two parts to that. Well, there's three parts, right? There's administering the program. Mm-hmm. There's an overhead. The second part is acquiring the conservation easement on the land. And there's, the land costs there. There's also the overhead of administration of that, recording, attorneys, all this stuff, contracts. And then third is there's the, and I get this wrong all the time, so I'm just going to go ahead and call it the kickback that the city
amenity
gets.
funds, the amenity funds.
The amenity funds that the city receives that is then supposed to be used for improvements in the town center, for parks, for open space, for trails, those kind of things. So those are the three factors that go into that $80,000. We get part of it back, but it is expensive.
No, I was just looking at the exchange, and there's some that's like a couple thousand or 15,000. I'm like, what? Why? Yeah, but
yeah, it's
okay.
the location of the land.
Yeah.
Property adjacent to the city is very expensive.
Classic.
And so you
Okay.
compare that to, say, Enumclaw,
Yeah.
and you might actually be able to negotiate that deal to a lower price. And I did want to speak to the amenity funds really quickly, because those are so important. Those amenity funds helped build the second phase of Evans Creek Preserve, that parking lot. And that was actually one of my big capital improvement projects that I managed. So that one it wouldn't have been possible if we had not acquired that land and had the money to make those improvements. So we have seen a benefit, and it's 25% of the sale of the TDR comes back to the city. And that's to help mitigate the impacts of development. And the Planning Commission, one of the concerns is that enough? Is that percentage enough to mitigate those impacts? And I think that's an honest question.
Yeah, I guess if they're 80,000, 25% is a lot nicer than the cheaper ones. But so for the first question, maybe I'm still interested, like you said, like let's fix the ILA. I also don't know how many FTEs it would take. Like you said, is a lot of administration and your responsibilities to have an internal program. So it's like a whole other body.
I'd say, at first, it would be a lot easier to use King County as an administering agency. over time, we may want it on our own, right? I think there's going to be a tipping point with Arch when if we get the number of units that the county has and the state via PSRC and the county have allocated, well, that's going to be a lot of staff for Arch to run that. We might as well have that staff in-house here doing it ourselves. So there's a point where you make that transition. But initially, the startup cost, I'd say it's a lot more feasible and economical to look to King County and pay them, a rate per TDR credit or something.
And then the second question, if we expanded, which I'm still not super into, I do like looking at the internal, but if we did need to expand to have those greater options, I would like to add letter D, which would be focusing on the emerald necklace and then also a boundary by council. So it's kind of like a combination of all of those. And then the third, I just don't know, like I understand what you're saying. It's good if it is exclusively focused on the town center. I just don't know, like, what can we write in there that, like, in the future we can change or add or something? Or I don't know how long those ILAs are for, I guess, either.
It's a good question. I think it still runs out of credits and then it needs to be renegotiated.
So, yeah, I don't know how open those ILAs can be of, like, if something happens, can we change it to something more internal and stop restricting the city, I guess?
Yeah, and you always preserve that right as a council if you want to amend an agreement under different circumstances. That is definitely something under your preview. And the fact that it's, 13 years since, it's time for a look at that. And maybe even after this amendment, maybe we look at those a little more often, like every 5 years, and keep that on the work plan.
So what I'm getting here, was there more I could?
I was just going to give Kelly more of a hard time, but please go ahead. Yeah.
I've given her quite a hard time already, and it will continue for another week. What I'm hearing here is that the preference would be to focus on the internal program. I'm really hearing that. However, there is opportunity to do possibly a hybrid, which is an update light, which would really be focused on, modernizing the ILA, not really growing it, if you will, but setting it up so that we've learned a few things in reading it, and maybe there's some word choice or some language that could be improved, especially with the second round after the first 20 are used.
And I just wanted to add to that. I think that was really important to us as staff, was to come to City Council before we moved too far down the line. If we receive direction like we have tonight, that changes the whole strategy. And we did tell staff at King County that we need to get this direction so we know how appropriately to move forward. And so this has been a really important check-in for us to make sure we're in alignment with council's desires on this ILA. And I agree with David, just to maybe an ILA update light would be appropriate. And again, it is to modernize it and to make the proper references, like to the appropriate code sections, because those have all changed with the Phase 2 development regulations.
And I one really quick piece here. You've heard this before, but we have been on quite a journey here in the city. When I came on board, there was not much interest in the town center. There was interest in the R zones. We'd had the same development regulations in place since we incorporated. We went through development regs update phase 1, development regs update phase 2. And that drove interest back to the town center. It also slowed the development on some of those pieces of property that shouldn't really be built on because they're not properly situated. So we really have seen a change in the dynamics of development in the city. And what this is doing is it would take us across the finish line to add that additional tool to really start to hone in on where development should go in the city and drive it to those places that we want to plan for and that we want to put the infrastructure in place to serve in the long term for the future of the city.
Great. Well, thank you. And thank you, Kelly. How many years have you been here at the city?
I've been here over 14 years.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I started here when my son was 4, and he is now a freshman in college.
Wow.
So I've really loved my time here and the staff, and obviously I have the best boss in the world, and I'm not saying that on the record to butter him up. He has been amazing to work with. Yeah, yeah. I'll Venmo you later, or you'll Venmo me later. No, but it's been a wonderful experience, and I've just really been honored to work here at the city. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for everything. I've only known you for 2.5 years, so, or not even that, so thank you.
Yeah.
I know we all really appreciate you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you,
Yay.
Kelly. We're going to miss you, Kelly. I'm going to try not to cry.
All right, I think I'm assuming Mike is virtual. Awesome. So next is our city council retreat follow-up on our definitions of success with Mike and maybe Rachel and Scott.
Good evening, Council. Mike Sugg, Supervising Management Analyst in the City Manager's Office, joined by Deputy City Manager Rachel Bianchi. And tonight we are here to follow up on the definitions of success, which were discussed as part of Council's retreat last month. As a quick background, you'll recall that each council member took a survey before the retreat asking how you define success over the coming 2 years. And during the retreat, we reviewed this feedback, specifically looking at areas where there were commonalities among your survey responses. Following that robust discussion, staff went back and attempted to capture council's input in the draft definitions of success that are included as Exhibit 1 to tonight's agenda bill. And the intent of this whole exercise was to set clear and realistic milestones for the community to evaluate the city's progress, along with understanding why the city is undertaking these efforts. If you'll give me a few seconds, I will go ahead and share my screen to quickly explain how the exhibit in your packet tonight is organized. The exhibit is laid out with the council's previously adopted goals at the very top. The goals have not changed, as neither staff nor the facilitator heard any desire to do so during the council's retreat. The middle section contains the proposed definitions of success that are based on council's input at the retreat, and this is really the focus of our discussion tonight. And the last section shows the relevant measurements that will be available after we complete the community survey later this year. And this is how we will show progress towards the goals and the definitions of success. And we'll be able to continue tracking these items over time as we perform the survey on a regular basis moving forward. Before we turn it back over to you, Mayor, to facilitate discussion on whether council is prepared to move forward with these or whether amendments are desired, Deputy City Manager Rachel Bianchi is going to touch on staff's response to the questions that Councilmember Stewart submitted over email today. Rachel, are you ready?
I am here, Mike. Thank you. So again, Rachel Bianchi, Deputy City Manager. Thanks for having us here tonight with this item. Councilmember Stewart sent in some questions and observations, and we just wanted to proactively provide you with staff feedback on those. So the first was a question about a fiscally attainable citywide capital improvement plan. That is part of our work for this year. Councilmember Stewart had a lot of larger questions about, would we consider bonding? Would there be discussions about options costs, all of that? And so yes is the answer to that. The citywide CIP is actually, it brings together things that you will look at over the years, right? So you've already passed the PROS plan, which includes the parks portion of the CIP. Later this summer, or late spring, early summer, you will pass the TIP, right, which is the transportation. So the only thing really that's going to be in any way sort of new, and that's not even really a true phrase, right, is going to be general government facilities. So looking at our 6-year commitment to all of our facilities, as well as we wanted to make sure that we know what our 6-year horizon for technology is. So, but the purpose of all of this is to bring them all together. So there's one place that you can see really the true arc of capital investment over 6 years in one place, because what you've been seeing them is bits and pieces as they come before you. So hopefully that answers that first question. The second one was on public safety engagement and the question as to whether or not there was more desire to have more than education and awareness. And we will just say that's what staff heard out of the retreat, was that's what we heard, where we heard council's focus was. Obviously, you all are going to have a discussion next, and if you choose to adopt, amend, you'll make that decision. For our work around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, there was a question about whether we needed something more to say that we will engage with the community in a manner that ensures everyone feels welcome and included. You may remember from the retreat, we did have a discussion about a coming North Star or equity framework document that the committee is currently working on and will be bringing to you for adoption later this spring. That is a part of that document as well. And then finally, there's a question on the environment, whether or not there's enough there for defining success around enacting policies and programs around GHG emissions and reductions in solid waste. Again, late last year, you all passed the Climate Action Plan, and now we have the Sustainability Commission up and running. Staff felt like within those, within both the Climate Action Plan, which is your adopted plan, with the work that the Sustainability Commission is going to be doing this year, that those efforts were captured in those. But again, we look forward to the discussion and are here to support that in any way you need. Back to you, Mayor.
Great, thank you for answering those. Council, I will open it up to you if you have any comments or suggestions. Councilmember O'Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if my comments are too much in the weeds and too much in the nitty-gritty, but I just thought I'd resurrect these ideas that were talked about at our retreat. When I talked about DEIB, I had brought up the point of supported employment program here at the city, and I know we were talking about that North Star document, and I just wanted to bring it up to the fore again, that that's something that I would really love to talk at a council level about, if that's what's necessary. I'm not really sure how you begin a program like this, but I'd love to kind of keep talking about that. And because I think if we're interested in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it includes all aspects of that, including people with special needs, which doesn't, in my opinion, often get talked nearly enough. So I wanted just to keep reiterating that. The other point that I had was on transportation, and I had mentioned about the establishment of a transportation advisory committee. I'm not sure, again, like I say, that might be too much in the weeds on this level document, but I just wanted to bring that up again. And if that's something as a council we could discuss, if that's something that the rest of council are on board with and would like to see, but it's an idea was brought up as part of public comment. I wanted to resurrect it again, and maybe at another point we can talk about if that's a direction council would like to go, but I just wanted to bring that point up again. And that was all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta.
Yeah, really quickly, this was feedback I'd provided in the survey, but our environmental goal says protect and, if appropriate, enhance the natural environment and address climate change. To me, when I read that, the if appropriate seems almost begrudging, and from my understanding, this is meant to be a public-facing document, so that stuck out to me when I first read it. When I read our packet again this week, it stuck out to me again, so I just wanted to bring it up that maybe there is different wording that we could use there. I think I understand the intent in that we're not going to enhance everything with only at the right opportunity, but yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because it has jumped out to me every time I've read this document.
Councilmember Stewart.
Apologies, Mayor. Councilmember Gupta, did you have something in mind that would work, that you think would work better? Or we're all ears.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, maybe where appropriate is fine. Yeah, I just I didn't think of anything because I didn't want to wordsmith up here. But
No, I appreciate that. I was just you called that out very specifically, and so I thought maybe you had something that resonated better with you. Which again, we're all ears.
Maybe I emailed something in that survey. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry.
Okay. No worries. Thank you.
So either scratch it or where appropriate.
Yeah, I think so.
Mike, you're the magic one on that, on wordsmithing, so you always come up with something good. All right, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I appreciate you responding to that. For the fiscally attainable citywide capital improvement plan, I'm super excited by the plan, and I guess I wasn't clear in my question. I'm sorry. I was just curious because it says that we would identify the funding over the, that we'd have funding for this 2 years and then identify the funding for the other 4. Again, I love the idea. I just didn't know if that was sort of us biting off more than we could chew, was really more of where I was going with that funding stuff, because I think bonding is going to, like, when you pull it all together and you see it all together, there are probably going to be some big numbers in there. And so I'm all in. I just didn't know if that was a realistic view of success in the next year, right? And that's where I was kind of going with that, so.
I would just say, just like the tip that you do, right? You're making sure that the initial 2 years are funded. You're not necessarily always funding in the out years. A CIP is the same way. So, but it does show us, again, it's that comprehensive list of what our responsibilities are. So I don't think it's really going to be much different from what you've seen previously on the one-offs.
Okay.
It's just more in a consolidated place. That being said, the discussion about bonding is probably coming at some point.
Okay, that's fine. So that's great. For the public safety, I really did feel like we kind of maybe missed it, and maybe we didn't talk about it as much at the retreat, but I do feel like public safety is really our top priority as a city, and that we should have, when we say what does success look like, it isn't just engaging with or educating the community on it, it's really keeping people safe. So I did feel like maybe we need to have something when we talk about what does success look like from public safety perspective. Success looks like maintaining, a certain level of safety in our city. I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. Did you have a question? And then for DEIB, I love it if there's a document, a North Star document that we're going to create, then I would actually like to see us add that to, is that the equity framework document? Is that what you're referring to?
Correct.
Then maybe what we could just do is, in addition to just, well, we say implement, so I'm okay with that. That's fair. And you said that document will address conduct as well. Okay. And then for the environmental one, sorry, was there something else? Okay. For the environmental one, I do think that you're right, we have the climate action plan, but we don't talk about in the definitions of success actually implementing parts of that or realizing some part of that. We just talk about engagement and we talk about reducing the city's emissions. So I do think there's a miss there. I think we should add something there. So I guess my ask would be that we add something in public safety that says we have definition of success is that we maintain, some level of public safety, not just engagement, and that for the environment, we either reference the climate action plan or we put something in there very specifically about adopting and enacting policies and programs that will lead to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and reduced solid waste. Thanks.
Yeah, do you want to comment on because I was looking at the public safety one, I guess if you just move or take off the word engagement for just ongoing public safety, would that meet what you're looking for? On number 2 for definition of success? If you just take off engagement. But I don't know. I mean, because it's hard. Or do you have anything, Deputy Mayor?
The only thing I was going to mention is that since the goal states maintain a high level of public safety, so clearly that's where the emphasis is. I think you have a good point about taking off the word engagement potentially. It's tricky because when you have the survey measurements as being an overall feeling of safety, that's tough because it's a feeling of safety. So the flip side of that is you're not going to say we're going to have 50% less crime. You can't put a statistic like that into a document like this, I don't think. You know, the impulse is to want to have something statistical to tie it to, which I find extraordinarily difficult. But with just for me, it works to just maintain the high level of public safety and continuing to just improve on that is enough for me, because I do think it's hard to get to that actual metric. I'm not sure what you tie the metric to. You can't just say, oh, we're going to be safe.
If I could, Council, one of the things that we talked about at the retreat was trying to focus these measures on success of what we can control as well, right, as the city. So if that helps.
And then with the environment, which part did you want to add climate action plan? Sorry for the...
It's just not mentioned, and so the only thing we talk about is engaging, educating the community and reducing the city's impact. But I think Rachel raised a great point, was that she felt, because I said we didn't have, because we're talking about what does success look like, right? Mm-hmm. And so success to me looks like we're going to actually enact policies and programs that will lead to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and reduce solid waste. Rachel said, maybe we don't need that because we have the climate action plan. Then part of success needs to reference that we're actually lighting up the climate action plan, because I'll point out that we've had an urban forestry management plan and it took us years before we actually started doing anything towards it. So just because we've adopted the climate action plan, while that is a great thing and I'm super excited, it in and of itself, like unless we call out success looks like this, then it felt like a miss. So I can go either way.
And is that for like a third definition? Because I know it just mentions climate action plan for the community to participate. So you were thinking like a third.
Yeah, I think it would be cleaner to just say success looks like enacting, policies and programs that will lead to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and reduce solid waste, only because I haven't thought of how we would incorporate in the wording the climate action plan. So I could go with that, which is fairly simple as a third item.
Or if you can somehow add, Mike, somewhere that just, I know because up above it says how residents can actively participate, but maybe how we as a city are implementing it, something like that. I'm not sure if that's
It's slightly different than that though, right? It's really about us creating policies and programs that are going to drive those down, not just, because our city operations account for a very tiny portion of our greenhouse gas emissions and our solid waste. So it's really about having other things to do it across the community, right? Like creating an incentive program for heat pump conversions, right? That would be a program that would help to actually move the needle. So it's things like that. I'm not being specific because we haven't figured that out. That's where we have the climate action plan. But if we don't call that out, that that's something we need to do, I feel like, to me, it's not. For me, I wouldn't feel successful if we didn't take some of those actions. But I'm happy to just wait, and I can propose an amendment if that's easier when we get to adopting it, and then we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I just can't think of how to add it here. Councilmember Lamb?
So I wasn't at half of the retreat, and so I actually have the benefit of looking at this probably through a different lens than everybody who was at the retreat. So, when I looked at this, I thought the goals were great. I thought the definitions of success was great. It shows what we're going to do to reach those goals. And if I take a look at the housing, for example, we're going to do the TDR program. We're going to have a town center plan. We're going to look at ways to incentivize diverse housing. And so those are the ways that we're going to get to those, to that housing goal. But I felt like there's a huge hole right after that, because there is no actual measurements. There's no numeric numbers that measures those definitions of success. And so I think the community survey measurements are great. That's qualitative data, and that's all perception though. You can't like put a number on that stuff. And so I took a look at some of what our other neighboring cities were doing, because every city right now they want to measure their performance. And I thought a really great one was the city of Kirkland. They have, for example, and it's set up very similar to what we have right now, but right in the middle, they would have 4 items or 3 items in how they measure success. So for housing, it would be how many affordable units were built, how many permits did they issue through the pipeline, and then they were able to track that through like 5 different years. And they used the community survey measurements, and then they did that as well. And so under community survey measurements, it would be, one of them would be, are we planning well for growth? There's probably a survey question that is similar to that. Kind of going back to what Deputy Mayor Howe was saying, how do you measure public safety? Well, you can measure public safety by what is our response time to police? Is it constant over, the last 5 years? And so that's like a measurable number. What is our response time to fire? Is that constant? Has our rate of collisions gone down at like certain intersections? Like there's like numbers that you can measure each of these goals. And so this is what I'm having a difficult time with, is that we're missing a whole section out of this. But overall, I think the definitions of success is great, and I do like having the community survey measurements just to show that, it will track whether or not the public perception of the actual numbers align, and maybe they won't align, and so that's something we'd have to work on. But I do feel like it is missing a whole section in each of these goals.
I appreciate that too, Councilmember Lamb, but yeah, that's like a tough one, because I don't even know if we have a baseline for some of these numbers, or if like that survey will help us, in the future add those specific numbers. I know we talked about it a little bit at the retreat, but yeah, Councilmember Treen.
I agree with Councilmember Stewart that on safety, you're kind of missing something there. How you add it in maybe is to do a third definition of success. But I heard you well, Rachel, Deputy City Manager Rachel, is that, if it's not within our purview, then how do you make that into a definition of success? And I think, is it possible to incorporate what Councilmember Lamb was saying, because my first initial thought was in safety is like, well, it's police and fire and it's response times. So how many calls do we get? How quick do we get out to it? And that data, that information we have available to us. Mm-hmm. So it's not like it's extra work or anything. It's just, hey, what we already do and the information we already receive, all we're saying is that's important to us. And that's what we do as a city. So I agree with, on the safety one, to add a third definition and including a measurable, which would be the response times, because we already get those. The second one that was really simple to just go, yeah, was on the environment, and Councilmember Gupta put it here that if appropriate, there could be a better use of term there. Because already we approved a policy with our stormwater that we do the enhanced version. So we already are saying we're going to do this. The policy's already been passed. So that's what we're going to do. So if appropriate, how about when necessary or when needed? Those were just 2 things that came to the top of my head right away. And then if you wanted to, I would support adding a third definition of success here as well, something that's measurable. Because like we were saying about the climate change thing, you really, something that we already are going to do, and the policy's there, it's just a matter of, are we gonna really do it? The money the money will be there. Does the project actually get built? Do we do the retrofitting, or what actually happens with stormwater? Well, I don't see that in there, unless I missed it. So I'm just saying that there's definitely a couple items that could be kind of intertwined into or separated out, and maybe you have 3 and 4, or you have, you really need a third one for the environment, I think. So those were just some of the few that I just go, hey, you guys are on the right track here. We can improve this document. I guess the other thing is if this is the first time the city's doing this, it's the first time I'm doing it with the city. So, this is a great start. And then if we look at it again in a year and say, hey, we'd like to add these things in, I'm okay with that as well. I'm just saying you could tighten this thing up a little bit here to start and then bring it back to us. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Gupta?
To Councilmember Lim's point, for the measurables, I know one of the big takeaways from the retreat, at least that I saw, was the desire for a dashboard to kind of communicate this to our residents. So maybe that's where our measurables live. This document is sort of high level, and then we take this, and the goal of the dashboard, as I understand it, is to help communicate this and how we are achieving these definitions of success. So maybe that's where we can put the numbers and say, this is how many affordable housing units we've created this year, and then start that data collection so that we can track how we're doing, because this is the first time we're putting this document together in this way. That was just my thought. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Howe?
I think mine's kind of a question. For agencies we don't control, we have a service level of agreement. So an easy way to measure would be, are they outside the boundary of our service level agreement? That would be police and fire. Because as you know, because we don't control fire, and I'll just use this as an example, what can happen is that when you take a aid car and you need it right away, but it's not available to you because they are still stuck, it's Swedish, because they're not allowed to leave yet, and it's called wall time. Now that's a problem with staffing of the nurses. It's Swedish, which we also do not control. So it's what I want to make sure we do, I guess, is to find that balance between not having to hire a staff person to do metrics, but to have some opportunity to be able to put a number where we can, wherever we can, where it makes sense. Without it being such a burden or too much of a burden. And I think staff is the only team that can probably tell us where that level really is. But where we have an SLA, that is something we should know if there's a violation of the SLA. So that would be one thing that would be really great to know.
So thank you, Deputy Mayor, because you definitely hit the nail on one of the heads there, which is the amount of time and effort it goes into doing some of these. The metrics that you all see in other cities is very significant and does require one or multiple staff members to do all that. That is why we were thinking the dashboard really would be those survey responses that you're going to get on a regular basis, that you're going to be able to see over time, right? Because we already have 2 years of data on those, so that you can really see, is the city moving the needle? Back to your point, what can we control and what we cannot? We actually don't, we have very little control over how many affordable housing units come into our city, right? You've heard David talk a lot about really wanting to spend time, this comp plan, removing barriers, but that's only one part of how an affordable housing unit gets built at the end of the day. So again, we leave it up to you. We could put in the SLAs for police and fire as a goal of definition of success is maintaining those response times during the year. Again, it's sort of looking to all of you here to tell us where you want to go.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'm hesitating on is that it's the middle of March, and I think those are the goals for 2024. Is that correct? So that's the only thing where I'm like, I definitely agree, getting something, removing that if appropriate, adding the third environment thing, like calling out the climate action plan, specifically our policies, procedures of what we actually can control. But the rest of that, I don't know how long it would take to come up with measurements. Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, if I may remind council that last year, one of the challenges we faced with trying to actually adopt our sort of council goals and measures is we couldn't all agree on what the measures would be, nor how to measure things. And so one of the reasons why we just came to you with a pivot, if you will, and trying to use the survey is to try to get at consistent things year over year or every other year, if you will, to ask the same questions, because some of these pieces are sort of community feelings. And I will use public safety as an example. We might say the metrics say we're safe, and somebody might not feel safe. And so how do we balance that up? And those are always going to be the challenges. I think really the question is, and I'll go back to one of the questions I raised for all of you during the retreat, which is, what is it that you want your community to know? Because I think from what I understand from all of you, this is supposed to be for your community, and what are you going to tell them about, and how we're doing? And that's why we linked it to the community survey, is to try to say we're going to set these pieces out, and then we're going to ask citizens a whole bunch of questions that reflect back on what your goals are, and then try to see how are we doing with your community. And then if we see things where we're like, well, we're not doing so well, then that's a place to put some emphasis, if you will. And I think that's how we intend on utilizing the results of the community survey, is to see, based on your goals, where are places where we're doing okay, doing great, or falling short, then we can adjust accordingly. So just for perspective for all of you to consider is, Mayor, to your point, actually getting these things in place, and then we can start continuing on the work. Or, if we want to, we're happy to try to come back and try to find measures and metrics. And I think that's the challenge that we faced last year. And just to remind, we went through 3 rounds of it and couldn't come to a final solution. So again, it's a question of what is it that you want for your community to share out with them.
Councilmember Stewart?
It's a study session, so we're not doing motions, are we? Or should we do? Okay. All right. Then I would, I want to say that I share that I think we need a combination of the survey and the numbers, but I also recognize where we are, and this is an improvement, and we're making progress. So I'm happy to take baby steps. Again, I think we can land on modifying the environmental goal to say maybe something like where appropriate or when appropriate, as opposed to if, make it seem more assertive somehow. I think for the environmental, I would like to see another definition of success that says enacting policies and programs that will lead to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce solid waste. And then for the community safety, I think we can add that we will monitor and maintain response times from police and fire. And I think that is something that, while we don't have direct control over Eastside Fire and Rescue, we do have a board that we have 2 members on. And so if that SLA were to start to drop, we do have levers to pull. So I think that is something, and same thing with King County Sheriff's Office. We have our own police department. So if things start to fall below some level, it's not that we don't have any control. We do. It may not be something that we have, that Rachel can go out and fix necessarily, but it is absolutely within our purview to make sure that that's happening. So I would like to see, I think if we change those 3 things, I think this is a good step in the right direction. And I think we need to put more effort during the course of this year into getting numbers and measurements, because while I think how people feel is important, sometimes presenting them with the data and facts will help, because they might feel one way, but then they'll see it and say, oh, it really isn't that way. It might have felt that way, but the reality is it's either better or worse than I thought. So thank you.
Councilmember Lamb?
So I agree. I think this is a good start, and I don't want to put, undue burden on staff, but I do feel we need a combination of the community survey numbers and actual measurable numbers. And so whatever easy numbers we could pull, I think would be really helpful. And to the deputy city manager's point that we don't build the housing, but we do issue the permits. And so even if we were tracking that, I think, and it shows that we're increasing, like I think that would be a good thing. So I would love to see 2 or 3 measurables for each of the different goals that could with numbers that could be readily pulled.
So Mike, what are your thoughts? Or Rachel? Or when are you coming back?
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I appreciate council summarizing those changes that you'd all like to make. I think we can definitely go back and make those 3 updates and look at some potential additional measurements that we can add to kind of supplement the community survey that are kind of lower hanging fruit. And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, Scott or Rachel, that we can bring this back to council on consent at one of your upcoming meetings for approval.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mike and Rachel.
Thank you,
We
council.
appreciate it. All right, so next up we have public comment. All right, Mary?
Hi, Mary Wichter, been in Sammamish since 2000. In fact, I used to live across the other side of the lake, almost where I live now, but I picked on this side. When I looked at my house, it was in Redmond, 98053 zip code, and when I moved in, it became Sammamish, 98074. So one of the reasons that's important is when King County created Sammamish, because like Newcastle's a new city, Sammamish was a new city, they went and they traced around the outline of the city and said, you're an urban growth area. Urban growth. You're not only supposed to have 15% that are in critical areas or something or other. And then they said this area here on the outside, they said, we're going to put an emerald necklace around. And this side is blue because it's water, but this is the emerald necklace. You really want to support that because King County is unincorporated there, and you don't want to have massive development that's going to drive on your streets and everything, but you're never going to get the taxes for. So I liked your discussion on the TDRs, and I'll speak mostly to that. You want to do as many as you can do in the Emerald Necklace. So maybe it's more than 75, maybe it's 100, maybe there's 125. In the text, it said it might be a little bit limited, but I think you want to do that in anything adjacent to that because that will help you. Like on 244th, you've seen King County development in our city, and they're using 244th in our roads. So that's just a thought there. So I'm going to actually don my Emerald City necklace. I think you should do as much as you can with the emerald necklaces as possible because it's really an opportunity, and you'll find that land at $80,000 for a thing is not a lot of money. The city does get $20,000 of that, and I remember at Evans Creek there were 2 parcels King County had that we bought for very little, I think $150,000 when Angie Fesser was parks. So that's super important to do. So I've got the emerald necklace on, and I like the fact that you're going to focus on in-city TDRs because if SDCA builds those Brownstone West and uses 20 to 25 or bonds to do something to do them ahead, we can do in-city TDRs. So I'm going to put my colors on here. These are the colors on the side of the city. All these colors here that are red, 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 red's usually I don't build there. We've been building there. We're supposed to cut those out and never build there. We built a lot of houses there. And one of the problems with what Kelly showed was they take it from erosion hazard area, and you can do it from the Thompson subbasin and from the Inglewood subbasin, but Tamarac's right in the middle, and we only have landslides, so we're never going to get any relief. So in 2019, I put in a docket. I've got my frequent flyer number from dockets, but I've had to wait until this year. The last time critical area codes were updated was 2013. Yeah, that's over 10 years ago. So we would be able to switch that. I just talked with David Powell as he was leaving. We would be able to switch that to geohazards or geologically hazardous areas, which are erosion, landslide, and seismic, which are down by the lake. So I wanted to let you know those things are in play. I did send my dockets from before because I understand those will be considered, but this is super important to do. You need to find a way to do it fast, not have it be another 3-4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine?
Hi, my name is Catherine Mattis, and my husband Michael Mattis is here, and he was wondering if he could yield, because we're at the same address, his 3 minutes to me, and we could then have 6 minutes to speak?
This is on the same email you all sent. It's normally 3 minutes per person.
Okay, so he can't give me his 3 minutes?
Correct.
Okay. Also, before I start, are you familiar where the proposed urban residential zone is? On the, so there's this, I haven't started yet, but there's a town center, and immediately west of that is a urban proposed zone for growth. It's on the, so it's on the FLUM map. Okay. Anyway, there is an proposed urban residential zone near our house. So my name is Catherine Mattis. I live at 629 222nd Place Southeast in Sammamish. Our house is located across the street from the lower Sammamish Commons. The entire north and eastern boundaries of our property is adjacent to the proposed urban residential zone. Because our house is situated in the northeast corner of this lot, our front and back porches are about 20 to 30 feet from where the city proposes an R12 to 18 zoning, stacked dwelling up to 60 feet high. We are zone R1. We moved to Sammamish 18 years ago when the town center was in the conceptual phase. The city encouraged citizens to participate, and we did so. We didn't fear the town center. Our investment of time and energy centered on achieving a positive outcome. An interesting and attractive place to live, work, play, and gather. Built to scale, mindful of its natural surroundings, and sensitive to its bordering neighbors. The resulting plan reflects this. The wedding cake concept was born out of the conscious effort of the city leaders to move density closer to the Sammamish core, to the town center core. Our street is an example of this. Our existing homes are R1. The baseline zoning for the Town Center Brownstone West project across the street before TDRs and other incentives is R4. Behind this becomes something more denser, and so on, until you arrive to the 6 or 7 story mixed core center. Now we learn that the city is proposing zoning R18 right next to R1, no transition and no cake. We've been involved in the city throughout its planning with the town center. We've given easements to the community, our community-owned land for the roundabout. My husband has been involved with the design of the community garden, which the city has incorporated. We understand that the city's intent is not to hurt us personally. The proposed upzone is a product of bureaucratic map making. It's nameless and faceless. But please understand, to us, this is punitive. From R1 to R18, zero transition. We had planned to age in the city, which we call home. We don't begrudge the cities trying to have diverse housing options. We have 2 children in their 20s who are facing the reality of housing costs. It's an important goal that we support, one that the town center was largely meant to address. We thought we were doing the right things the whole way through. Our request to the city council and the city planners, you're only giving me 3 seconds to say this. I can't tell you what it is, can I?
We do have your email as well. I think all of us got it. So Michael, if you would like to continue. And please just state your name.
Michael Mattis, 629, 222nd Place, Southeast. Yeah, and I just want to emphasize that we just found out about this. Kind of a fluke that we did, that this was happening. And the way the information came to us was because developers who apparently know about the upzoning and the land use designation change are already contacting the neighbors around us. We found out from them. We didn't find out from the Community Development Department, anybody at city government. We were not informed, but the developers were. They know, and they're already kind of moving. So again, as the way as Kathy presented this, the land use change would literally bring R18 right up to our fence. We're 20 feet away from that fence on basically both livable sides of our house, front and back. And we could literally be, as well as our neighbors, you could literally be in the shadow of what goes up there. You can build up to 60 feet high in R18, stacked dwellings, contiguous. And our request to you is, as you go through the comp plan process and you look at these maps, please understand there's existing residents there. We've lived there 18 years. We've been paying taxes here for 18 years. We do support increasing the diversity of housing in this city. As my wife explained, we've got 2 kids coming into that age, so we get that. But please have some sensitivity to what is already there. You know, look and say, we've got R1 right here. Maybe it doesn't make sense to have R18 right against it. How about we transition? The whole concept of the wedding cake was transition down to surrounding neighborhoods. If you're gonna do that, why just put another cake right across the street? It kind of blows out that whole concept. So again, as you go through the process, please be considerate of the realities of what's on the ground now. Work with us, keep everybody informed, and think in terms of how you thought in terms, or at least the prior Planning Commission and Council thought in terms of the town center. How do we do this in such a way to be mindful of the impacts on existing residents? Can we maybe stair-step away from the R1 zone? Maybe adjacent to that, we'll have R6, and then a little bit deeper in, close to Southeast 4th, a little bit denser, and then so forth. Something like that might make sense, and we'd be happy to participate in that planning. But again, just please be mindful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do we have anyone that signed up online?
We do.
Cool.
Per the new reasonable accommodation, those who had pre-registered by 3 o'clock today, please raise your hand if you wish to give testimony. Pre-registered callers will be unmuted in the order they've raised their hand. You'll have 3 minutes to provide comment. Please start your comment by stating your name and the city in which you live for the record. And I will now unmute the first caller.
Good evening, City Council. Paul Stickney, Sammamish. Good comments tonight, staff, council, and the public comments. My comments tonight do tie into, the 2 topics you covered tonight, TDR, goals and definition of success, and the comp plan, and about measurable housing target numbers. Our city of 22,000 homes has about 85% were constructed by King County, and the 15% constructed by Sammamish were mostly large single-family homes. So relative to economic and workforce and the demographic makeup of our city, we do have significant oversupplies of large single-family homes priced in the neighborhood of 1.2 million and above, and significant undersupplies, about market rate houses from 500,000 to $1.2 million, some higher priced condos and townhomes, and affordable housing at 30 to 80% AMI, which is 175 to 500. It's critical to realize that market rate shortages for local lifetime and legacy housing needs are easily 10 times greater than affordable housing needs. Make no mistake, Both are critically important, but internal market rate shortages are 10 times the magnitude of need. My key ask is to set numbers to modestly begin to meet significant housing shortage needs over the next 10 years, mostly in town center by going up inside the town center itself. Also take this next comp plan cycle to really trailblaze, have fun, go deep, get information and plan sustainable numbers for sub areas and the bonus parcels, and to a much, much lesser extent, other neighborhoods in the city. In the written comment I sent in today, I sent a comment to the Planning Commission. Please read that, as well as links to the comments made to the Fiscal Sustainability Task Force that talk about tri-ideological growth solutions for town center and the city, which add comprehensive advantages at carrying those out. So take a look at those. My short summary recap is to plan to actualize some housing units in town center to make up past shortages that are significant over this cycle, 8, 9 years to 10 years. Then plan for the future in comp plan in the future so that our community can stay and become richer financially for quality of life and social fabric. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else that signed up?
That was the only pre-registered caller.
Great. All right. Thank you. Scott, do you have anything?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick items. I had the pleasure of attending the EFR Awards last Friday night with Councilmember Stewart and Deputy Mayor Howe. It was a wonderful event, and it was nice to see all of the staff get recognized that are, EFR is quite large these days, and there are a lot of staff, and so it was nice to see everyone get recognized. One of the pieces I'd like just to, if you haven't seen it already, I'd like to invite you this Friday. IACS, our senior services provider, has invited all of us to their one-year anniversary lunch at the Beaver Lake Lodge between 11:30 and 1. I think it'll be a wonderful event, and please, if you can attend, I think you can go on our website and find the RSVP to attend, and I will see you there if you come. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Howe?
Thank you. So I included in our report tonight just a document that outlines Indian Country 101. This is a 20-hour course that you may have a hard time finding the time to do, but you'll notice that the top 3 classes are for the nation, but the other 3 are of Washington State. And what they will do, I think, for us is they will help us avoid miscues and missteps in working with our local tribal partners. And so what I'm optimistic about is that we'll each find time to go through that. There's one whole class on just tribes and fish. It goes through culture and history. And this was a course that was actually offered, I think, it's the Nature Conservancy that did it, and Mary Lou Pauley took it, a condensed version. But this is online, so you can go at your own pace. So it's just, since we're all at different times meeting with different tribal members, I just think it will help us with our sensitivity and cultural awareness. So I just wanted to mention that. And then tomorrow I have an EMAC meeting, which is the Emergency Management Committee. And that is probably the main thing. Right, thanks.
Yeah, Councilmember Lamb?
I have a Public Issues Committee meeting on Wednesday, and the main topic will be the crisis care centers. I sent out the agenda, and on Friday I have a solid waste committee meeting, and the main topic will be the solid waste rate update, and I'll also get a REPlus update, and I'll bring that back to council in my next report.
Thank you. Anyone else? Awesome. Oh, Councilmember Gupta?
Yeah, we had an Eastside Transportation Partnership meeting Got a chance to meet with all the other representatives in person in Redmond, so that was a great opportunity. And we just kind of went around the room and discussed what all our priorities were. I think what came out of that was public safety, last mile connections, and safety at transit stops. So looking forward to seeing what other cities are doing and hopefully bringing some lessons back for Sammamish.
All right, anyone else have anything? Cool. All right, thanks, everybody. Have a good night.